Hey, are you ready to go back to 1891? We're at a really old cemetery here, Knoxville, Tennessee. This is Old Gray, and we're going to tell the story of a guy named Robert McKeon who's in a strange mausoleum, and he has a strange story. So let's take a little walk here amongst the old stones. Back to 1891, right here in Knoxville. Boy, this is a neat old cemetery. I see an interesting sunken in mausoleum there. But yeah, this is just a really strange story. It kind of reminds me of the story of Dr. Burritt we did up at Maple Hill Cemetery in Huntsville, Alabama. Just these strange people and strange stories. Shout out to Dallas Parsons, our sub, who suggested this story. I never would have heard of it. But yeah, James Robert McKeon, he was 23 years old in 1891, and he lived with his mother here in Knoxville at 700 Front Street. And at that young age, he was the master of properties at this renowned opera theater that was here called the Staub. That was where everybody went. It was the place to be. Well, he was doing pretty good until Thursday night, September 24th, 1891. He was tending to his duties. And let's just check out this mausoleum while I'm telling you this story. Look at this. Sneed, 1854. The big steel door. Look at that. Wouldn't it be interesting to go in there? So he comes out of the opera house. He comes out, and there's this guy named Clarence Lillard. He's 29 years old. And Clarence just starts beating him with a stick. And Robert is like, he hits him so hard, and it's with a cane. He hits him so hard, he just almost knocks him out. He knocks him to the ground. Poor Robert. He gets up and he starts running. He starts running away. And Clarence Lillard is just following him. And he's pounding on him. He gets him again and knocks him down again. Finally, Robert makes it to the backyard of the chief of police here. And Clarence takes the cue, and he goes back to Gay Street, which is the name of the street by the theater, and he catches a carriage home like nothing happened. So you ask, what would make Charles Lillard go after Robert McKeon like this, in this rage? Well, the next day the newspaper headlines would tell all. And the headlines, pretty hilarious. Listen to this. The headline said, "Resented the insults. A gay joker has a broken head as result." Don't you love the journalism from back then? A gay joker has a broken head as a result. So yeah, what was behind all this? You go through the article, and the story is I guess Robert had really insulted two of Lillard's sisters. Now get this, on a prior day, the sisters were walking in front of the theater, and there's Robert McKeon sitting there, and he had this rope that was strung across in some certain way from where if he pulled on it, it would, well, they would walk over the rope, and he pulled the rope, and it was tied high on the other side, and I guess it pulled her dress up. Rather embarrassing. And if that wasn't enough, on the day of the attack where Charles went after him, this is what really set it off, was that if that wasn't enough, what he had done to them before, he insulted one of the sisters as she had walked by the theater, so that Charles Lillard had just had, blew his top. He was a hothead anyway. And of course the newspaper men caught up with him right away, and they wanted to get his side, and he would fume quote unquote, no matter what people think of me, no man can insult my sister without answering to me for it, period. So the newspapers love that, and that's where this whole article came from. So they take Robert to the doctor, and he's in bad shape. But of course, in those days, they're like, oh, the wounds aren't serious. Literally had a cracked skull, concussion probably, and he was bleeding, his skull was split. But they're like, I guess in those days, like if you're still alive, it's not serious. So he goes back to his job, Robert does, but what he does, he's like a kind of a coward. And he enlists his aunt to meet him every night at the stage door when it's time to close, so that she can walk home with him, because he's afraid of Clarence. And Clarence is still kind of stalking him. It's kind of funny. I mean, it's so weird. It's like, where's the police? And she does it for like, I don't know how many weeks. It was maybe a month or two. But old Lillard, Charles Lillard, he is stalking. And finally, he's had enough. He confronts her at the stage door, at the usual place that she's waiting for him. And there were witnesses, and they said, all of a sudden he pulls out a gun and he shoots her. And he shoots her 3 times. And down she rolls into the gutter. And the police come, and she's not dead yet, but she would end up dying. And they're like, what happened? And it's like, well, she took a slingshot and she tried to hit me with a slingshot or some instrument, and I got this little cut on my head. So we can't tell from the news articles whether he ended up in jail or not. He may have served some time, I don't know. But clearly he got away with murder, because at some point where we pick up the stories from the newspapers, and thanks Deb for pulling some of this out, he's a free man. Well, he was free until 14 years later, where he would end up shooting an innocent man to death, an unarmed man. He would shoot him 5 times. It was October 9th, 1905. Old Charles Lillard has a coughing attack, and the doctor comes, and he's gagging all over the floor. And it is there that he dies, conveniently, before going to prison for 20 years. But it is not before his friend Robert McKeehan here dies himself. Robert died 11 years after the incident from some strange brain disease. Now, what do you think? What kind of brain disease? Fractured skull? What's the thing the football players, right? All of that we now know about. I'm sure that's what it was from. It was probably from the attack. Still a very young man, right? So his mom is inconsolable. So in 1904, she builds this mausoleum, which, of course, after he passed. The strange story about this mausoleum, right up here, is that she would come here every day, and she brought a chair, and she would sit inside there, and she had pictures and frames and all kinds of stuff in here. And there's actually a photograph, an old photograph of the casket, and you can see on the lower right, you can see the picture frame of some of the artwork. It's all stuccoed over right now. And why is that? Well, in the 1950s, the Vandals started coming, which is always the case. I mean, you could come here, it was pretty cool. You could come here and you could look through the door and you could see the chair with cobwebs. And in the picture, you can see the caskets, cobwebs, and the chair and how everything was set up like a time capsule. Because, of course, she died. And her casket, I think he's on the left, I'm not sure. But her coffin is in there, casket on top of his. And I think it's just the two of them. So they're stacked in there, and she's in there. Right? Look at the surface of this. This is like a concrete mix, and it's just crumbling away. Mixed with stones, aggregate. Look at that. Can't even tell what that is. It's got some type of dark, but here it's, well, I don't think that's got to be some type of matrix of stone of some kind. I don't think it's marble. Now, look at this. I'm going to try to use the snake camera and see if we can see in there. Now here's the deal with the snake camera, guys. Snake cameras are for looking in pipes. The focal length of a snake camera is only like 3 to 6 inches. And if you shine it in a room, it's not in focus. You can still kind of see what's going on. That's why I'm wondering, yeah, I can't, unfortunately, it's too tall for me to, and I'm not going to get a ladder. But it's about 9 feet. It's about 9 feet above the ground there. But if I'm standing here, I think I can lean up and maybe I can get the snake camera. If it works, great, you'll see it. If it doesn't, well, I wonder if I can get a flashlight and a cell phone. All right, I'm actually back at home narrating this a couple of days later, analyzing this footage that I was able to get. As I expected, the snake camera did not work out, too blurry. Got my cell phone out and was able to maneuver it by leaning over with my foot and hanging by my arm, and there you go. We started picking up some images. It was pretty tough. I was hanging by a thread by my left arm, reaching way up. But there you can see through the spider web. The inside of the door, the arch door, now a better image. And I'll say there's a couple of money shots. I'll freeze it here. This is probably the first money shot. You can see the casket on the right. That's Mom's casket on top of Robert's. So I'll get a little close up here on the door. Very interesting door, and there's some framing above on the right and the left. I'm wondering what that is. Some type of structural, but big old iron door. And I will get a little bit of a better image here. And this is really the money image. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and there you can see the casket. And there is the picture frame on the right. One of the pictures. Now, the green arrows I put on there, that is about 14 inches, I would say. So that casket is sitting up on the other one. That's pretty high if looking at the outside casket. And the red arrows here are showing the detail of the edge of the. I was comparing this to the casket of Roberts you can see on the right here, and if you look at the detailing, it's similar where the curve comes up like a bump and then the top of the casket. But if you look at the blue arrow here, you can see some ribbing. So that is probably a different casket. I was just trying to compare the two, which makes sense. Similar design, later period. But there's the picture frame, there's the casket, and we get a good look inside.
So that's
pretty
the
good
story.
For a cell phone.
Now, they didn't put him in here initially because they were afraid of grave robbers. And while they were building this mausoleum, they had Robert in the vault, the cemetery common community vault. I'm not sure where that is. It's probably long gone. But interesting obituary from the Journal and Tribune, March 24th, 1903. And yeah, he died. It took like a year or so to build this. James Robert McKeon died at his home, 700 Front Avenue, Monday evening at 8:30 o'clock. Funeral will take place at the house at 2 p.m. Wednesday. The body will be put in the vault at Old Gray Cemetery until a later date. And then there's another obit from the Knoxville Sentinel, March 25th, 1903. Burial will not take place for some time yet. Burial is postponed on account of fear of the family that the grave would be robbed and the body dissected on account of the oddness of the disease with which he had died. It baffled the doctors, is what it said. Oh, it's probably that brain injury manifesting itself over the years. So his mom, Maddie McKeon, this is where she was. She died in 1912. Like I said, her coffin is on top of his in there. And we do have a picture. But I will, hopefully the snake camera works out. If it doesn't, well, if it did, you've already seen it. But this is where we're going to end it as the helicopters move in. All right, from Knoxville, Tennessee, rest in peace to the McKeons. See you later, everybody. Stay safe.